This is Federalist 37, Part 7. In the last part, I talked about this book, which is a collection of essays. It's an excellent book. It talks a little bit about what the differences were between the states, and talks also about the issue of slavery in some of those states. So it's a good one. If you can, definitely read this when you can. Again, if you're seeing this for the first time, this is where I went to the university, and it's University of Oklahoma, OU, and I live in this community. I've been very lucky to have benefited over this last 30-some years from this community and this library. So I'm just giving them some credit and thanking the community for this, thanking the OU community and everybody involved. Okay, there are two more paragraphs left, and this is another beautiful paragraph here. Would it be wonderful if, under the pressure of all these difficulties, the convention should have been forced into some deviation from that artificial structure and regular symmetry which an abstract view of the subject might lead an ingenious theorist to bestow on a constitution planned in his closet or in his imagination. See how beautiful it is? It says somebody sits down in their closet or on their chair at home, just theorizes about something, and or comes up with something on their imagination, forgetting that society, you deal with human beings with different interests, different groups, and lucky it is that we haven't done that. We got together in Philadelphia, so many people from so many different places, and deliberated and have brought you a constitution that will hopefully be good for your future. Then he continues, the real wonder is that so many difficulties should have been surmounted, and surmounted with a unanimity almost as unprecedented as it must have been unexpected. It is impossible for any man of candor to reflect on this circumstance without partaking of the astonishment. It is impossible for the man of pious reflection not to perceive in it a finger of that almighty hand which has been so frequently and signally extended to our relief in the critical stages of the revolution. So he says, it seems like what's happened here, the hands of God is in it. Because we have taken part in something that has never done before. People getting together, deliberating without a tyrant on their back, deliberating and deciding on how to establish a great republic and teach the world a lesson that the age of monarchy, the age of absolute monarchy, the age of tyrants is over. We had occasion in a former paper to take notice of the repeated trials which have been unsuccessfully made in the United Netherlands for reforming the baneful and notorious vices of their constitution. Remember, in Federalists 18, 19, and 20, we looked at different confederacies, and one of them was the United Netherlands. And United Netherlands situation was very close to the United States. They were also Protestants, majority of them, just like Americans were, Protestant Christians, and they established or tried to establish a republic. So he's saying the parallel there. And even there he says they had shortcomings. It seems like the lessons of history was not learned by them, but we, on the other hand, have sat down and paid attention to history and learned from it. The history of almost all the great councils and consultations held among mankind for reconciling their discordant opinions, assuaging their mutual jealousies, and adjusting their respective interests is a history of factions, contentions, and disappointments. And maybe classed among the most dark and degrading pictures which display the infirmities and depravities of the human character. If in a few scattered instances a brighter aspect is presented, they serve only as exceptions to admonish us of the general truth, and by their luster to darken the gloom of the adverse prospect to which they are contrasted. In revolving the causes from which these exceptions result and applying them to the particular instance before us, we are necessarily led to two important conclusions. The first is that the convention must have enjoyed in a very singular degree an exemption from the pestilential influence of party animosities, the diseases most incident to deliberative bodies and most apt to contaminate their proceedings. The second conclusion is that all the deputations composing the convention, means all the representatives, were either satisfactorily accommodated by the final act or were induced to accede to it by deep conviction of the necessity of sacrificing private opinions and partial interests to the public good, and by despair of seeing this necessity diminished by delays or by new experiments. So he says, all these difficulties that you see, and when people get together and factions take over and self-interest takes over and usually ruins any time people have got together to establish a good government, luckily didn't happen to us because, number one, we could work things out, we could deliberate, we could realize that there are different interests and we had to work towards getting to an agreement. And also our delegates to the Constitution, for the most part, realize that they are at an important juncture in the history of the world, that they can really make an important mark on the history of the world and forego their private interests, look over what's best just for them, and look for what is best for the community, and give you this Constitution to reflect on and hopefully adopt. Remember at the top of the paragraph when he's talking about factions in deliberative bodies, he's talking of pestilence, things like that. He's like, it's like a bug, a bacteria, a sickness takes over an organism, a living being being a society, and these factions take over and destroy the society. So I hope that you continue to read this along with me when you find out about these readings, and I hope you remember that it is a long-term process, except you just need to go over these 30 minutes a day, and before you know it, in 1 year, you have covered it. And it's important enough that you put this time to it, if you like, I think you will be well rewarded